Magua, Panuay Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Blessing of the Feast of First Fruits. Barakatha Yahweh, Bashem, Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathan the Noah, Hakhag, Bakawarium, Bashalawam, the Wada, Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the feast of first fruits in peace. Thank you, so be it. Mind Shai, read everything. The Aliyah Ma'ah Shariah Machad, Psalms 121. Anya Harayim Aimim Ye Harim Mayan Yabawa Azarya Yabawa Mayahawa Shasha Shemayim Warataza La Yanathan Lamawat Regalia Yela Yanawam Shashra Marka Hanela Yanawam Wala Yashan Shashra Mar Yashirale Yahweh Shamaria Yahweh Tazalia Ayu Yim Yim Yawumam Hashamash La Hakaya Wayarak La Balayala Yahweh Yashamaria Makab Ra Yashamar Napashya Yahweh Yashamar Habalakya Babawaya My Fab Wa Aid I Willam Basham Yahweh Shai for what Amen.
Psalms 121. I will lift up my eyes unto the hills. From whence come my help? My help comes from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to move. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in, from this time forth and even forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Shemaiah Sharela, Hero Israel, Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Shemaiah Sharela, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad. Shemaiah Sharela, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad. Shemaiah Sharela, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad.
Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thapala Yahweh, the Lord's Prayer, Matthew 6 and 9. Abiyanawa Shabbat Shemayim Kodash Aya Shamka Yahweh Malakwavka Taba'a Ratazawanka Haya Aisha Baratazad Kabashamayim Nakanlanawa Lakham Yawam Zad Wasalaklanawa Kabawat Nawa Kasalak Nawa Kabawat Yanawa Wala Abiyarnawa Oh Nasayawan above Hawashinawa Murakaya Laka Hamalakwa Wa Allah Wa Thaparat Wa Walam Aman.
Matthew 6 and 9. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debt as we forgive our debtor. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen. Ha'asharam Tazawah, the Ten Commandments, Exodus 20 and 3. La'ab, Yahaya, Lakab, Alahayim, Akarim, Alapanyat, La'ab, Thaishad, Thaishad, Lakab, Pasod, Wala'ab, Thaibadam, La'ab, Thalakwakath, Shamwab, Yahawab, Alahayakab, Lashawab, Zakar, Ath, Hayawam, Hashabath, Lakodashwad, Kabad, Abyakab, Wa Amakab, La'at, Theratazak, La'at, Thana'at, La'at, Daganab, La'at, Dainat, Shakur, La'at, Dachamad, Ko, Asherat, Lara'aika, Aman.
Exodus 20 and 3. Thou shalt not have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto any graven image of any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, is a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate, and show mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the Lord's name. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that take his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God, and thou shalt not do any work. Nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gate. For in the 6th day the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them is, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy day may be belong upon the earth. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his servant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor. Amen.
Amen. Yeshabah, be seated. Barakateh Yahweh, Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai, Asharam Tananawa, Parya Gapin, Thuada Amun. La Yahweh, Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai, Yashra Allah. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. Admadwa, Paniwa Yerushalayim, stand and face Jerusalem. Barakatha Yahweh, Haggadah, Rakawam, Abiyah, Ranawai, Eliyawan, Malak, Shemayim, Warataza, Wakal, Dabarim, Kayayim, Wagam, Hamashiach, Mayahawe, Arawanawe, Habnawe, Apale, Yawa Aitaza, Yahawashad, Zakarnawe, Yahawe, Bartazawan, Ainka, Yashala, Zarnawe, Banai, Wasap, Yashala, Oh, Nanawe, Yam Yan, Maitha, Kayawamyam, Makwadam, Babakusha, Shalak, Mike Allah, Watazawadak, Allahayim, Lab, Maganawa, Rabharnawa, Washamab, Ionawa, Bakur, Shalak, Haroka, Shao, Yawashai, Lanawa, Lalamadnawa, Rabiam, Kakamai, Thabawana, Wada Show the barker by Sham Gehowisha the water them yet why will aman. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth and all things living, and also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, the wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember us, Yahweh, favorably your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel, most high, we beg you, right now, like the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the spirit of Yahweh Shai to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, always and forever, so be it. Repeat the Hebrew only. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the law. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathan Lanawa, HaThawarah. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us light to see. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathan Lanawa, Awar, Larawat. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the ram's horn to call the people. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathan Lanawa, Karan, Hayyo, La Korab, Ha'aim, Yeshabra. Be seated. Okay, so Shalom Yasharala. All right. So Shalom everybody that's here in Philly. Shalom everybody watching us on live stream, and Shalom everyone listening in on teleconference. Welcome to High Asherah Kanaz, or the Congregation of Israel, where we teach that the descendants of slaves, as well as the indigenous peoples found throughout the Americas, make up the southern and northern kingdoms of the 12 tribes of Israel. And that we fall into a lower state politically, economically, even religiously, because we broke the laws of God found in the Bible given to us by Moses. And that we come out of this lower state that we fall into by turning back to these commandments we broke by following Jesus Christ as our example, which we know he comes in the volume of the book. It is written of him. The one way we do that is by keeping the high holy days found throughout the scriptures, which we see that we're supposed to keep even still to this day. even after Christ coming, dying for our sins, Israel's sins, and rising again. We're still supposed to keep these high holy days. And one we're keeping right now, to the best of our ability, is one known as the Feast of First Fruits, also known as the Day of Pentecost. Right? And we're going to read scriptures that go into why it's called these things and why we keep it. Why we keep it around this time in the summer months, as it's connected to the wheat harvest. And when the wheat harvest grows up, all right. So my name is Nabia Zerubbabel. I have the privilege of going through the service this evening. All thanks to the Most High in Christ by way of the Holy Spirit. You can just write down for your records that according to our calendar, it would be July 16th, 2022. According to the Gregorian calendar, I'm sorry. July 16th, 2022. But now, according to our calendar, which is the solar lunar calendar, it would actually be the fourth month and the 19th day. Once in the fourth month and the 19th day. Someone get that door, public question. As you heard in the prayers when we started out, this is called the Feast of First Fruits, or in the Hebrew, Bakawar, or Bakawarium, plural, for first fruits, plural, right? And as you can see in the bottom here, we have the Hebrew spelling as you look here, where it says Ashar, that's the first word, then Chag, and then the word after that is Bakawar Yam, which just means happy feast of first fruits. So let's go to Leviticus, our favorite chapter in Leviticus, where we get the majority of our holy days listed. So let's get this feast of first fruits and what it's all about. Leviticus chapter 23. So once again, Leviticus chapter 23. So Leviticus 23rd chapter. We're going to start from verse 15. Actually, we'll start from 9, and then we'll go read this section first, and then we'll read 15 down to 21. So this is Leviticus 23 in verse 9. So it says, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, I'll try to keep it brief yet complete. We know it's early in the evening, but like I said, we'll just try to make sure we give you the complete sense, but we won't draw it out too much so that we can enjoy the festivities, whether here in person or watching from a distance or listening from a distance. So once again, Leviticus 23 in verse 9, which reads, and Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, verse 10, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when ye be come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priests. So remember, at this time, he's talking to our people when we were in the wilderness, right? Traveling around, because the Most High had spies go out, one from each tribe, to spy out the land. only 2 of those 13 spies gave a righteous report. So after 40 days and nights of spying and giving that bad report, as a judgment, he said, now you're going to be in this wilderness for 40 years, right? So that's what happened. So while we're in the wilderness, the Most High gave us instructions on the holy days that we were going to keep so we can get started right out there in the wilderness before we would go into an actual land, which would be Israel after that point. So the law was always timeless, but then he would speak to how to keep laws given after this period where they had to go through the wilderness. Hence, like he said, the harvest of the land that he'll give us. So he tells us to bring a sheaf of the first fruits unto the priest, talking about Moses' brother Aaron and his descendants. It says, ye shall wave the sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. And ye shall offer that day when ye wave the sheaf, and he lamb without blemish of the first year for a burnt offering unto Yahweh. You read Leviticus, the first chapter, goes into how to do a burnt offering. So each holy day we had different things we had to do, different offerings we had to give up. This is one of them. It says in verse 13, and the meat offering, which Leviticus chapter 2 explains how that works, shall be 2/10 deal of fine flour mingled with oil, an offering made by fire unto Yahweh for a sweet savor. So the meat offering technically wasn't meat, but it went with other offerings that we gave. It was a flour mingled with oil mixture when you read Leviticus, the second chapter. There are different ways we could prepare it too, right? As far as like on a frying pan or like in an oven, what have you. Different ways we can make that meat offering. So it's giving us pretty much that recipe for how to do this and how much of it to give. It says, and the drink offering thereof shall be of wine, the fourth part of an hin, right? As you go past like chapter 5 going forward into 7, it goes to other miscellaneous offerings that we did, like drink offerings. But 1 through 4 of Leviticus, those chapters go into the, we can say chapter 5 also. But they break down the main offerings, which are the burnt offering, the meat offering, the peace or free will offering, as well as the sin and trespass offering. But now reading on, it says in 14, ye shall eat neither bread nor parched corn nor green ears to the selfsame day ye have brought an offering unto your power. So the Most High gets his first before we partake in what comes in when it comes to the harvest that the Most High blessed us with. It says, it shall be a statute forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings. Now it says, reading on in verse 15, ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. So now, from that first wave offering of the sheaf, of the beginning, as we're going to read in other places, it talks about what? It's focused on the wheat harvest, because we have many things that we grew, but the focus here is the wheat harvest, when that comes up, right? Because that's what we want to check now, even here, as we're in our land of our captivity, right? We may not be farmers. Most of us are city mice as opposed to country mice, so to speak. So we want to definitely check the harvest here to see when the wheat harvest actually begins, to know when to start counting. Like I said, we'll get that. It says, so you want to get a link or something?
Mm-hmm. So the wheat harvest came a couple of weeks ago?
7 weeks ago.
Oh, 7 weeks ago.
We're about to read it now. Not a couple, 7 specifically. Right? That's the whole point of keeping the day of Pentecost, right? It says, ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that ye brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. So if you look at the, is a good website you can use to keep track of what's growing here in North America, especially. It's the part of the United States Department of Agriculture. It's called the National Agricultural Statistics Survey. I think the email is nass.usda.gov, right? So they'll keep different reports that they'll put out every so often, keeping track of not just wheat, but they'll keep track of like soybean or sorghum or rice or other things that they grow in the field, right? So we want to keep an eye on the wheat statistics to see when the harvest will begin, because they keep track of each of the things that are grown, and they'll have like 4 or 5 different statuses as far as like when it first starts to come up, and then when it starts to bud, which they call it when it's headed, when the harvest is headed, and then finally you want to look for the chart that says harvested for wheat to see when it comes in. And usually, as a rule of thumb, we usually start around the third week in May, the third Sabbath in May, to say that's when the wheat harvest usually begins. But looking over the last couple of years and kind of comparing year to year, it's been starting more so at the last week of May, going into the first week of June. But when you go on that and look at those reports for the crop reports, you'll see that over the last couple of years, it's usually started like either the last Sabbath in May or the first Sabbath in June. So once that wheat harvest begins, that's when you know to start counting these 7 Sabbaths that we're reading here. This is a way of just doing it here in North America. If you're somewhere else in the world, you want to base it on the wheat harvest of wherever you live, if they grow wheat there. And if not, the closest place to you that grows wheat, you want to try and base it on that time. It says in verse 16, even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall ye number 50 days. Ye shall offer a new meat offering unto Yahweh. So it says, unto the morrow after the 7 Sabbaths shall ye number 50 days. So it's the 50th day when what? You have 7 Sabbaths that come to pass. Because why? Every week is 7 days, right? So you take 7 days times 7 weeks. 7 times 7 is 49, right? So before the sunset, we were in the 49th day. And once the sun set, we came into the 50th day. That's why it's also called Pentecost, which just means 50. That's why it says in verse 16, shall ye number 50 days, and ye shall offer a new meat offering unto Yahweh. Verse 17, ye shall bring out of your habitations 2 wave loaves of 2 tenth deals. They shall be of fine flour, they shall be baked with leaven. They are the first fruits unto Yahweh, right? It's not going into these meat offerings he will make, and it's even getting you the proportions as far as how much of flour you're supposed to use when you make these or bake these meat offerings. Now we talk about during Passover or the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We know during that time we're not supposed to eat anything that has leaven in it. But here it says that what? This or these have leaven in them. So it's not to say that leaven or leavening is wicked. No. It's just the Most High has us eat things that don't have leaven beforehand, right? When we keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread or the Passover in the spring months. But here it says, they shall be baked with leaven. So here we can have leaven in these meat offerings. It says they are the first fruits unto Yahweh, so they go to him. So this whole idea, this whole focus behind this holy day is what? Always be mindful of whatever the Most High has blessed you with, as much or as little as it may be, acknowledging that what? The Most High gets his due first and foremost, right? So whatever your fruits of your labors may be, the first of those fruits belong to the Lord, because the Most High is the reason why you have any fruits to begin with, right? Let's not forget that. So that's the main thing we want to always be mindful of when it comes to this feast of first fruits. Verse 18, ye shall offer with the bread 7 lambs without blemish of the first year, and 1 bullock, and 2 rams, and they shall be for a burnt offering to Yahweh. Once again, Leviticus, the first chapter, goes into how to do the burnt offering. With their meat offering and their drink offerings. You go into chapter 2 as well as chapter 5, going into chapter 6. It goes into how to do the meat as well as the drink offerings. It says, even an offering made by fire of sweet savor unto Yahweh. Then it says in verse 19, then ye shall sacrifice 1 kid of the goats for a sin offering, and 2 lambs of the first year for a sacrifice of peace offerings. So we also did what? A sin offering too, which chapter 4 Leviticus goes into. And it says one kid of the goats. Because you look at our different offerings, they always had to be animals that were clean, right? Animals that, as far as uh, cattle, it had to what? Have a cloven hoof and be and chew the cud. Chew the cud. So lambs and goats are examples of that, as well as bullocks. Then it says in verse 20, and the priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits for a wave offering before Yahweh, with the two lambs. They shall be holy to the Lord for the priests. Right? So us giving them to the priest doing the work, right? To partake in. Remember, the burnt offering was totally consumed. You go into that. But the peace offering, certain part of it was eaten by the priest. But it was as if the Most High was eating it, since the priests were pretty much operating on the Most High's behalf, right? So we will give anything to the priest, not just the first fruits during this time, but even we give our tenths or anything else we give to the priest, it was like us giving it to the Most High. So that was their inheritance, right? And Levi in general, they got a tenth of all of Israel. All when it comes to all of Israel's increase, that tenth went to the Levites. And when it came to offerings, it went specifically to Aaron, other Levites, Moses' brother, and his sons that came after him, which were priests. It says in 21, ye shall proclaim on the self same day that it may be a holy convocation unto you. Ye shall do no servile work therein. It shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. So what do? No servile work, meaning work for hire or work around the house. We're supposed to keep it like we keep a Sabbath. But it's a feast. That's the only difference. And it says it shall be a statute forever, right? So it's not something that's over and done with. We're still supposed to keep it, even now in these times. In all your dwellings, no matter where you live, right? Here or abroad, in Israel or outside of Israel, right? No matter where we've been scattered to over the years. If we have eyes that can see, ears that can hear, and a heart that can understand this truth, we should be keeping this throughout your generations. Once again, this isn't something that's passe or that's something that's over and done with, right? So just be mindful of that. I see the question here in the chat. Khan, that is a clean beast. Anytime you have a question about a beast, whether or not it's clean or not, just make sure you always look up and see if it chews the cud and has a cloven foot. If it does, then yeah, it will fall into that category, right? So the Most High, He'll give us what? Things to where we can make up our mind or understand on our own by going back to His law to confer, to make sure, yes, this is the case. Look it up. Look up the how a giraffe works and find your answer. Because the Most High said He gave us examples in Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14, but He didn't give us all of them. So He left it up to us to use our own head to go, do you have the means to figure out which animals have a cloven hoof and that chew the cud? If you can do that, you can figure out what you can and can't eat when it comes to land animals.
I don't know why nobody eats giraffe. That's a clean species. Oh, is that why they don't eat it?
It's like with the locust, right? It's like with locusts, right? Where it's not very popular here in North America, but you read about the prophets of old eating locusts. But it's not on most people's menu either. But it's lawful.
I think that's health food too, right? Locusts is a health food too. And then in the store, chocolate covered locusts.
I think they do that to them. And they said they're high in protein, right?
For John the Baptist, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was that? A grasshopper.
Yeah, they're related. So yeah, the grasshoppers are cool too. And then when it comes to birds, right? I know the way they classify them now, the word they use is galliforms, because in the Levitical law, when it comes to birds, opposed to land animals, it just mentions a list of birds that you can't eat, and it goes into a bunch of birds of prey. But then the birds that aren't listed, they're okay. So it kind of does the reverse. But they call them galliforms. So examples of galliforms would be like birds that usually eat grain, right? Like chicken, like pheasant, like quail, like turkey, right? Those examples of galliforms. So they would be lawful to eat. As long as it's not a bird of prey or a scavenger bird, right? But if you had a question about, something like the brother does, just feel free to bring it to the class. We can go into it. Sometimes it might just be a one-off, right? May not even be worthy of a whole class. But from here, let's go back to Exodus. Let's go to Exodus 34. Exodus chapter 34. See, as people think about the Most High's law, it's a finite number of laws, right? Finite number of scriptures, infinite amounts of wisdom that can be drawn from it, right? Most High gave us just enough so that we can figure out anything we need to live this life here amongst the creation. And if we get stopped or get stuck, that's where it comes to us searching the scriptures again and looking a bit closer, something we may have missed. Because we can read the scriptures over and over again. You might read a verse 6 times and you read it the 7th time and you see something you didn't see before, right? You go, wow, I never thought of this verse linking with this other verse this way. Because the Most High is what? He's testing us to see if we're going to be diligent in searching out the scriptures and studying them, even the things that we already are familiar with. And when he sees that diligence and that trust that we have in his word, that's when he'll decide to what? Open the spirit and open up our minds even more to see what was already written, right? Our people that are in the world as well as other nations, they always hone in on, well, aren't there missing books in the Bible, right? What about this? What about that? But knowledge would seek out, what is missing from the Bible? Yeah, there are other things that are written down that aren't part of, what we call the canonized scripture. But wisdom would say, before I try to seek out the other books that may be missing, wisdom would say, let me try to understand what's actually here. Instead of focus on the water that's not in the glass, I haven't really figured out the water that's in the glass, right? People ask me questions, they say, oh, okay, you believe in the Bible and stuff, what do you think about, life on other planets? And I'm just like, life on other planets, who knows? I can't speak on other planets. But wouldn't wisdom say to figure out how to live on this planet? Because clearly things are a mess here right now, right? With the current leadership. So what sense is it you going off to somewhere other planet and making a mess out there, right? Which we see Esau going into space, which is prophesied he would do that. He's going to take his wickedness and then take it anywhere he goes. They make jokes about it, in different movies and pop culture, right? Where they say when you go out to outer space, it's going to be corporations out there too. Like look at that one movie with the Fight Club, where he's like, space exploration ramps up. He said the corporations are going to name everything, right? It's like Planet Starbucks, the Microsoft Galaxy, right? But it really won't be theirs. It's the Most High's. But that's how Esau is, right? He puts a stake on the ground and says, mine, right? Or puts his flag on the ground and says, this belongs to me. Because this is his time to rule. But he doesn't acknowledge the Most High when it comes to his rule. But wisdom would say, let's try to get things right here on the earth first and foremost. Let's try to deal with the creation the way the Most High intended first. Then we can talk about going off-world and going into other dimensions and everything else that we already can do through the Spirit, and we have done through the Spirit when you read what our forefathers and foremothers did, right, in the Spirit. The Holy Spirit is still cutting edge, more cutting edge than all the technology we have even to this very moment, even the stuff that they got hidden, right, in their little special departments, right, that they don't want to talk about. They want to say it's above top secret. All that stuff still can't compete with the power of the Holy Spirit. And what we can do through the Holy Spirit with just our bodies. let alone some device we build outside of us, right? But that's its own discussion. But now I mentioned Exodus 34, right? So now if we're in 34, let's get this verse. Exodus 34. And let's start from verse 22. So Exodus 34 and 22, it says, "And thou shalt observe the feast of weeks of the first fruits of wheat harvest." So here's the verse we use to show which harvest in particular. We're looking at the wheat harvest. So we read back in Leviticus 23 about starting to count the weeks. We want to do it when it comes to when we first begin to harvest the wheat. After it's already grown up and headed and budded and all that, when we begin to harvest it, that's when we start to count. So it's a process that crops go through right before you cut them down. So that's when we start counting. It says, "The first fruits of wheat harvest and the feast of ingathering at the year's end." Right? So the feast of ingathering at the year's end is talking about the harvest year, but it's not talking about the year. It's talking about the harvest year because the feast of ingathering happens in the fall, right? We know we have a winter season that comes after that, right? But that's what the feast of ingathering is about. Let me read on in verse 23. It says, "Thrice in the year shall all your men children appear before Yahweh power, the power of Israel." So thrice, which just means 3 times, are we all supposed to appear, right? During the unleavened bread in the spring, in the first fruits, which would be in the summer, and in the ingathering, which is in the fall, right? So we're supposed to all come together, right? During each of these major feasts, which ironically we have a major one every season. Because even later on, during the time of the Maccabees, we even got one for the winter too. And if you can't come together, we do it over by phone or through internet, and you just apply grace if something happens. It says, "Neither shall any man desire thy land when thou shalt go up to appear before Yahweh thy power thrice in the year." I think I skipped something. Let me read 24 from the top. "For I will cast out the nations before thee and enlarge thy borders." So the Most High is telling us what? He's going to enlarge our borders. Once we get into the land of Canaan and make it our own and rename it, it's going to enlarge our borders, right? Which refer to the landmarks, right? That decide where our inheritance stops and where another tribe begins, or where Israel's inheritance stops and then where the other nations, where their land begins, right? Depending on wherever we were at when it came to us building ourselves up. "Neither shall any man desire thy land when thou shalt go up to appear before Yahweh thy power thrice in a year." So when you go to keep the feast in the capital, which will become Jerusalem, no one's supposed to go run up in your land and go, "Oh, he left to go keep the holy day. Let me go on his land and plunder what he has in store, or his other crops." No, you're not supposed to do that. It says in 25, "Thou shalt not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leaven, neither shall the sacrifice of the feast of the Passover be left unto the morning." So it's shifting back to the Passover here, saying we're not supposed to offer any thing that has leaven during that time. Then it says in 26, though, "The first of the first fruits of thy land thou shalt bring into the house of Yahweh thy power," like we read in Leviticus 23, right? Then it says, "Thou shalt not see the kid in his mother's milk," right? Now it may seem like, okay, this is kind of off topic. Why is it mentioning this all of a sudden? What is it talking about is when it comes to offering different offerings, when it comes to clean animals, whether it be a bullock, a ram, a lamb, a goat. In this case, a goat. It says you should not see the kid in his mother's milk. That's why you'll see in the law it says of the first year, right? I mean, it has to be of a certain age. It can't be so young where it's still being nursed by its mother, right? Once it's of a first year, it's already past that weaning stage. You see? So you hear about certain people like so-called Jews. They'll you go into their stores, they'll have what they call veal, right? It's supposed to be, lamb or goat that they get when it's young and tender before it gets to that first year. So that's off. We shouldn't even be doing that. We shouldn't even be selling that, right? But once again, they're not us. They're not the real Israelites. So as we look at things that they do, claiming to be us but not us, we're going to find a whole lot of things that they're not supposed to do, that none of us are supposed to do. Uh, Yet they want to call themselves Jews, or call themselves Jewish. Let me read on in verse 27. It says, "And Yahweh said unto Moses," actually, you know what? Now I'll stop there. Let's jump back a little bit further before I go past 26. Let's go back to Exodus 23 now. Exodus 23. Exodus 23, and we're going to start from verse 14 now. So Exodus 23 and 14, it reads, 3 times thou shalt keep a feast unto me in the year. Right? So the Most High will mention things more than once throughout the scriptures, right? Even in the first 5 books that Moses wrote, you'll see things in there more than once, right? Because we're the children of Israel. Just like any proper child, children can what? Forget things, even after you remind them. So as the Most High's children, he'll remind us. He'll give us laws twice. Sometimes he gives it a second time, and then he might add a detail that he didn't have the first time. So it'll be incentive for us as we study different laws and try to commit them to memory to remember, okay, when it comes to the law of paying your servants, by the end of the day, I know it's in Leviticus, but then there's another one in Deuteronomy. At least I can find both. So it's like reinforcing that knowledge of that law. Okay, I know that Exodus 20 has the 10 commandments, but I know he repeats them in Deuteronomy somewhere. I think it's chapter 5. So it's like reinforcing you to learn those laws, even though they're repeated. But it's funny, even with all that, there's still over 600 plus laws, right, to remember, even though many of them are repeated. So it takes someone of skill and someone of patience to isolate all those laws, even as they've been repeated, and go, okay, which law or how many individual laws are there? And then you start to go into how different laws relate to one another, right? So it says in verse 15, thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded thee, in the time appointed of the month Abib. For in it thou camest out from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty. See that? So we already kept this back in the spring, right? It says in the month of Abib, which in the Hebrew comes from the word which means in the ear, right? Going into when the barley harvest comes up in the spring, and how we're supposed to keep that. Then it mentions in 16, and the feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labors. That's what we're doing right now. Which thou hast sown in the field. It says, and the feast of ingathering, which is in the end of the year. Once again, the end of the harvest year in the fall. Because in the wintertime, you're planting things. You're not growing things typically in the winter, right? Very few things you grow in the winter, right? There's some things here and there, but most of your planting happens in the winter months. So that when the spring comes back, you're raring to go when the seasons change and the precipitation changes. It says, when thou hast gathered in thy labors out of the field, 17, 3 times in a year, all thy males shall appear before you have a power, or out of one power. Thou shalt not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavening bread, neither shall the fat of thy sacrifice remain until the morning. going into the Feast of Unleavened Bread again. Then verse 19 jumps back into the Feast of Firstfruits, which we're keeping now. The first of the firstfruits of thy land thou shalt bring into the house of Yahweh thy power. Right? So once again, that being the main theme behind this holy day that we're reminded of, while there's a lot of work involved, especially when we were more living off the land, which some of us do, but not as many as people as we used to living off the land. Like I said, most of us are closer to urban areas as opposed to living on the farm. Some of us still do farm though, but it's what we would do when we had land and we were tilling it ourselves. The first of the first fruits of thy land thou shalt bring into the house of Yahweh thy power. Then again, it's repeated, like we read in the other part of Exodus. Thou shalt not see the kid in his mother's milk, because the offering is supposed to be of the first year. Okay? So it was Exodus 23, read from 14 down to about 19. I know we were talking about it earlier before the service, but let's go to Numbers real quick. You read Numbers 28th and 29th chapters. It goes into the specific offerings that we would do daily, as far as the sons of Aaron, what they will be receiving from the people and the offerings they will make. Also on the Sabbath day, what offerings they brought, as well as the new moon, what offerings were brought, as well as all the major holy days, like we just read about. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Firstfruits, the Feast of Ingathering. You had a question?
No.
Oh, okay. Feast of Firstfruits, Feast of Ingathering, Feast of Unleavened Bread. Later on, we would have the Feast of Dedication, right? Which we would keep similar to the Feast of Tabernacles. But that would come later during the time of the Maccabees, right? Sons of Mattathias, the era they lived in.
Actually,
But now this is Numbers.
and on the feast of Ingathering is the end of the feast of first fruits, right?
No.
That's not?
That's in the fall. That's all I was saying. That's why it says the end of the year, referring to the end of the harvest year.
Oh, there's nothing to do.
So,
What's the 49 days that we kept? Pentecost. There's a beginning and end of this, right?
it's the end of that right now. It's the 50th day we're in right now. If you start counting from when the first week when the harvest, the wheat harvest began in North America.
Oh, okay.
That's what I was saying a little earlier.
Okay, so I missed that December 7th.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I was telling folks earlier that if you look at the chart, at least here in North America, places that grow the most wheat, you'll see that the harvesting typically begins. It was like the third week of the third Sabbath in May, but it's become like the fourth Sabbath in May to the first Sabbath in June. It seems to have been starting like later, at least over these last couple of years. So we take a guess at it and we come up with our chart. Other holy days we can pinpoint because we know where the new moon's going to be. When it comes to this harvest day, it's subject to change. So we make a guess. We say, okay, we'll start counting from the third weekend in May, or the third Sabbath in May, and go from there. It's usually the time frame, but it could come in technically before that, or it could come in later than that. Sometimes you'll see the harvest begin not the first week, but even the second week in June. That's happened a couple times too over the last couple of years. You look at the chart and see when the harvest began each year in North America. That's the best way we can do it now. Like I said, if you don't have land where you grow wheat, if you had land and you grew wheat on it, you could just use that, right? You already got a measure right there to say, okay, I got a field that I grow wheat in. I know when I begin to harvest it, I'll just start counting. Once again, if you're not the farmer, at least like we're in the information age, right? Like Daniel said, knowledge shall be increased. So, Esau's our oppressor, yeah, but he keeps records, and sometimes he makes records public knowledge, so we can get these records online and see when the harvest begins. But now, this is Numbers 28. Numbers 28. I'm going to start from 26. Just going into the offerings that we would do for the Feast of Firstfruits. So Numbers 28 in verse 26. It reads, also in the day of the first fruits, when you bring a new meat offering unto Yahweh, like we've been reading about, the flour mingled with oil. After your weeks be out, like you asked about, brother, after the weeks are finished, the 7 weeks, when we first started harvesting wheat, ye shall have a holy convocation. That's why we come together now. You should do no servile work. So it's supposed to be kept like a Sabbath. Just like we kept the Sabbath every week, supposed to keep this as a Sabbath as well. 27, but ye shall offer the burnt offering for a sweet savor unto Yahweh, 2 young bullocks, 1 ram, 7 lambs of the first year. Those are all clean animals. It tells you how many, right? And what they're supposed to be offered for, a burnt offering. Once again, Leviticus, the first chapter, goes into how we do that. It says in verse 28, and their meat offering of flour mingled with oil, 3/10 deal unto 1 bullock, 2/10 deal unto 1 ram, a several tenth deal unto 1 lamb, throughout the 7 lambs. Now it's going into a meat offering and how much flour mingled with oil is supposed to go with each of those offerings, right? A different amount for each of those different animals offered. And it says, and 1 kid of the goats to make an atonement for you. We already read that too, about doing a sin offering during this time as well. And ye shall offer them beside the continual burnt offering and his meat offering. Because you read earlier on in this chapter, it talks about what? Burnt offering is done all the time as part of the duties of the priest. 1 in the morning and 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening, right? So when it says the continual burnt offering, that's what it's talking about. And his meat offering. It says, they shall be unto you without blemish, and their drink offerings. Right? We got those details in other chapters. But those are pretty much the scriptures in the law we can go to get the background on the first fruits. Now, we actually kept this in history, even in the time of our captivity. So sometimes folks may say, well, we're far away from home. Do we still rehearse the righteous acts? And the answer is yes, just like the Judges 5:11 says, right? We got an example of our righteous forefathers, namely Tobit of the tribe of Naphtali. We have evidence of him keeping the first fruits. Let's get that real quick. Now you go into Tobit and his son Tobias of Naphtali. They were under the Assyrian captivity, right? When the Assyrian Empire was a dominant empire in the earth. This was in the 8th century BC or the 700s BC, right? You read about the particular year when we were taken. Just like 586 is the year we remember when the Babylonians took the southern kingdom. Always remember 722 BC as being the year when the Assyrians took the northern kingdom captive. And for the same reasons, because their kingdom, just like our kingdom, was wicked, not keeping the Most High's law. And due to that rebellion, the Most High, for punishment, allowed the other nations to come in and take us over.
What you said, 722?
722 BC, yeah.
That was before us being taken down.
Us as in the southern kingdom, yes.
Right.
So they were part of the northern tribes, Tobit and Tobias and those that were with him. But now this is Tobit. I'm going to go to chapter 1. I'll start from verse 1 just so we have the full history, and then I'll get down to when they kept the first fruits. But Tobit chapter 1 verse 1, it says, the book of the words of Tobit, the son of Tobiel, the son of Ananiel, the son of Aduel, the son of Gabriel, of the seed of Asiel, of the tribe of Naphtali. or Naphtali, right? Today, they would be the indigenous peoples, right, that you find what? In the west and in the south part of South America, right? Namely the countries Argentina rather, and Chile, right? So today they're typically called Argentinians and Chileans. Once again, the indigenous peoples from those places, right? Because just like North America, South America, got a lot of nations that are there now, right? You even got some Southern kingdoms sprinkled throughout South America too, right? Sometimes in high concentrations, even in those countries also. They would be Southern Kingdom, not to be confused with the northern tribes that were there also, that came there first. Reading on in verse 2, who in the time of Emanessar, king of the Assyrians, was led captive out of Thisbe, which is at the right hand of that city, which is called properly Naphtali in Galilee above Asser, right? So going to where their land was originally in the northern part of Israel. Later on, it will be called Galilee, right? Even you see that name still being used on the time of Christ when he was teaching in the northern part of Israel, right? And their land was connected, was adjoined to where Asser was in ancient times. And it's ironic too, because even in the latter times, in the Americas, Asser is what? In the north and western part of South America, whereas Naphtali is in the east, the western, and the southern part of South America. You look at those countries in the northern and the eastern part. Sorry if I mix those up. Asher is in the north and in the east part of South America, and Naphtali is in the west and the southern part of South America. It says once again, I'll read in verse 3 rather. I Tobit had walked all the days of my life in the way of truth and justice, and I did many alms deeds to my brethren and my nation, who came with me to Nineveh into the land of the Assyrians, right? Nineveh being their capital city, right? Verse 4, and when I was in my own country, in the land of Israel, being but young, so talking about before the captivity came in, before the Assyrians came and took them, all the tribes of Naphtali, my father, fell from the house of Jerusalem, which was chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, that all the tribes should sacrifice there, where the temple of the habitation of the Most High was consecrated and built for all ages. Right? So you had some northern tribes, even though you had their leadership, Jeroboam and those that came after Jeroboam, set up other places for them to worship, right? Where they had the golden calf set up, right? You read about that back in the Kings, right? What an atrocity that was. But you have examples like these brothers here that still sought after righteousness, still sought after Jerusalem, the capital city, to do their offerings. They still made that trip down there, even though as a majority, as a whole, they didn't do it. But you still had some northern tribes that did this. It says in verse 5, now all the tribes which together revolted in the house of my father Naphtali sacrificed unto the heifer Baal. That's what I'm talking about. When you go back to 1 Kings chapter 13, it goes into that story, right? 12 into 13. It goes to the kingdom splitting, and Jeroboam, one of Solomon's servants, him taking the 10 tribes with him, having them sacrifice unto Baal, this golden calf. And then you had the other half follow Rehoboam's son, Solomon's son Rehoboam, to keep that line of David going in the southern kingdom. So you had Judah, Benjamin, Levi in the south, and you had the other tribes in the north. So that's what he's making a reference to here as you read this. It says in verse 6, but I alone went often to Jerusalem at the feast, as it was ordained unto all the people of Israel by an everlasting decree. So he's like, look, regardless of our kingdom being split as it was prophesied, all the tribes were still supposed to go into Jerusalem and going to Levi, going to Aaron during the feast time. So he made that trip anyway, right? So he went against the grain probably for a lot of his fellow northern tribers, right? That were still listening to what Jeroboam said when it came to offering to the heifer of Baal. But look at what he's doing. I went often to Jerusalem at the feast, as it was ordained unto all the people of Israel by an everlasting decree, having the first fruits, see that, and tenths of increase with that which I was first shown, and them gave I at the altar to the priests, the children of Aaron. See that? So not only did he give his tenths or his tithes, but it says he brought his first fruits when it was time. He brought his first fruits down there. So showing you that showing you that Tobit kept the feast of first fruits, just like we read in the law, we read above. I'll read verse 7 also, and then I'll stop. He says, the first tenth part of all increase I gave to the sons of Aaron who ministered at Jerusalem. Another tenth part I sold away and went and spent it every year at Jerusalem. Right? So it's going into his increase. And we had 1/10 he gave to them, another tenth he spent at Jerusalem, right? To keep his increase, the resource the Most High blessed him with, to keep them in that circulation. We see the heathen do this a lot, right? Where they buy and sell with each other, right? When it comes to buying and selling with other nations, it's like, what are we getting out of the deal? Anytime, they see us doing the same thing with each other, they'll say, hey, well, what's wrong with you? Why are you trying to separate yourself from us? Because they know when we put our resources and strength back into ourselves, it strengthens us. And they know their strength relies on what? Us taking our hard-earned dollars and wealth and resources and our first fruits and giving it to them, right? Working for them. So that's Tobit chapter 1. I read from 1 to 7 as an example. Our forefathers keeping the first fruits. For an example. Let's get another example too. This being on the time of Nebuchadnezzar, another spelling for Nebuchadnezzar, and one of his generals, Holofernes. Let's go to the book of Judith, also in the Apocrypha, chapter 11. Just going to read a couple of verses here. We're going to see first fruits being mentioned here as well. And then I'll get one more example of us being reminded to do this during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. So go to Judith chapter 11. Judith chapter 11. Let me start from verse 9 just to get right to it. So Judith chapter 11 and verse 9. So Jude chapter 11 and verse 9, it says, now, as concerning the matter which Achior did speak in thy council, we have heard his words. For the men of Bethulia saved him, and he declared unto them all that he had spoken unto thee. Therefore, Lord and Governor, reject not his word, but lay it up in thine heart, for it is true. For our nation shall not be punished, can the sword prevail against them, except they sin against their God. Right? This Achior being, I think I said he was an Ammonite, but he was working under the government of Nebuchadnezzar. But it's showing how nations had knowledge of what? Our strengths and weaknesses. They knew our weakness, that what? Only if we sin against our God could the sword prevail against us. He was telling his leadership that in the council. We can only have victory against these guys only if they sin, right? It says in verse 11, and now that my Lord be not defeated and frustrate of his purpose, even death is now fallen upon them, and their sin hath overtaken them, wherewith they will provoke their God to anger, whensoever they shall do that which is not fit or right to be done. So he's saying, let's go forward because they're breaking the laws. But now we were keeping the laws, he would have said the opposite. He would have said, look, we need to back up because they're keeping their laws and they're righteous. Whatever they want, whatever they're going to do, the Most High is going to fight for them, and we're going to fall down. We kind of saw that too in Esther, right, with Mordecai, right, and you had Haman, right, the Agagite, which is a family of Esau. He was crying to his family about, how humiliated he felt by parading Mordecai around the town for his thwarting of the assassination attempt, right? And then what did his friends tell him? That Mordecai is of the Jews, and if he's following the commandments, it might already be a wrap for you. You might want to, tread carefully. If he's following his God as a Jew, there's nothing you can do against him. They said that to him too. So you get the heathens at times, and you read in the scriptures, they'll acknowledge this fact and know, okay, before we even try to go toe to toe with these guys, we got to make sure that they're following our false gods or not following their God. Whatever they're doing, they just can't be following their God. That way we can cut them off from being a nation and then be able to enjoy the spoils of wherever they have, as they do even to this day. Verse 12, for their victuals or food fail them, and all their water is scant. So their necessities, their food and water, is lacking. And they are determined to lay hands upon their cattle in purpose to consume all those things that God had forbidden them to eat by his laws, right? So eating the things they shouldn't be eaten according to the dietary laws. Once again, he's saying we can take them because they're breaking laws given that they're in a desperate spot. Now in 13, and are resolved to spend the first fruits of the corn and the tenth of wine oil, which they have sanctified, and reserved for the priests that serve in Jerusalem before the face of our God. The which things it is not lawful for any of the people so much as to touch with their hands. So, in a modern sense, like with Esau, he'll say it's like taking money is meant to be taxable money, right? It belongs to the government. But you're taking that money and using that for something else, right? Or money is supposed to be allotted towards this program or that program. You didn't take it and then use it for other purposes, And Esau, according to his law, will throw it at you and say, you laundered the money or you misappropriated funds or what have you. But now this is our version of that according to righteousness, where we took that money, it's supposed to go towards the first fruits in the summer as well as the 10th, and then using that to, take care of our necessity. So it shows that he has that knowledge about how they can't do that, or how they're not supposed to do that, and how it's going to get them in trouble. It's just another example of first fruits being acknowledged, first fruits being recognized. But let's go to another place in history as well. Let's go to Nehemiah. I'm going to go to Nehemiah chapter 10. I'll start from 31. So that's the verse we tend to get, especially when we're out there teaching on the Sabbath day. Or any day we teach. But we're on the Sabbath, we'll always quote this verse, right? When we go through all the different laws we're supposed to keep on the Sabbath day, right? So Nehemiah chapter 10 and verse 31, which reads, and if the people of the land bring ware, right, or any victuals, so food or any type of tools or hardware, on the Sabbath day to sell, that we would not buy it of them on the Sabbath. So Nehemiah had to make sure that the law was being reinforced, because we just got out of captivity. A group of exiles of Israel came out of the captivity of the Persians and the Medes at this point, going back up to the land. So he had to make sure that we let those old habits die hard, because when we were far away from home, we picked up some bad habits from the heathens. So as we came back into the land of Israel, he had to make sure that we were dealing with the laws, statutes, and commandments, because we forgot, and you even had nations that were trying to come and do business with us on the Sabbath too, hoping that we will forget too. So they increase themselves, but then bring us down, like we just read in Judith, knowing that it would keep us from being too strong. So they could have the advantage over us. So it says that we would not buy to them on the Sabbath or on the holy day, like we're keeping now, or that we would lead the seventh year in the exaction of every debt, which that's part of our law too. Now that we're back in the land of Israel at this point, the law goes into what? Having a release that happen every 7 years, right? Where debts that were owed to your fellow brother, as far as his plot, whatever inheritance that he had, if you owed someone, it would be released. Or if you borrowed a part of land for your brother to use for a certain purpose, it would then go back to that person as far as their particular family and tribe that they came out of. Hence, that's what they call it release. So we're supposed to keep that and remember that. It says in 32, also we made ordinances for us to charge ourselves yearly with a third part of a shekel for the service of the house of our God, for the showbread, and for the continual meat offering, and for the continual burnt offering, just like we read in Exodus and Leviticus, what we were reading earlier about the continual burnt offerings as well as meat offerings. It says, of the Sabbaths, of the new moons, for the set feast, and for the holy things, and for the sin offerings to make an atonement for Israel, and for all the work of the house of our God. Right? So back to business as usual, doing things the way we're supposed to in the land, in the capital city, in the temple now that we're rebuilding. And we cast the lots among the priests, the Levites, and the people for the wood offering to bring it into the house of our God, after the houses of our fathers, at times appointed year by year to burn upon the altar of the Lord or Yahweh our power, as is written in the law. Now check this out in verse 35. And to bring the first fruits of our ground and the first fruits of all fruit of all trees year by year unto the house of Yahweh. So it's not just the field, but it's also what? The orchards, right? Because when it came to planting or being a planter, you had what? Typically three types of environment, right? Which was the field, you had the orchard, and you also had what? The vineyard, right? So the fields where you grew crops like wheat, but then you had orchards where you grew like different fruits like mangoes, apples, oranges, figs, right? Where you had trees. Then you had the vineyard also, they call a husbandman, right? That's where you grow grapes, right? That you use for juice or wine or what have you, right? So we had this type of work going on, right? So it says once again, I'll read 35 again. And to bring the first fruits of our ground and the first fruits of all fruit of all trees year by year unto the house of Yahweh. Then it says, also the firstborn of our sons and of our cattle is written in the law, and the firstlings of our herds and of our flocks to bring to the house of our God unto the priests that minister in the house of our God, in that we should bring the first fruits of our dough and our offerings and the fruit of all manner of trees, of wine and of oil unto the priests, to the chambers of the house of our God, and the tithes or the tenths of our ground unto the Levites, that the same Levites might have tithes in all the cities of our tillage, or where we grew things. So once again, it's going into them, going back to the instructions that they forgot to keep. Now they're back in the land due to the Most High's mercy. They're making sure they're keeping it and keeping it the right way so that they don't get kicked out again. They don't, the Most High doesn't have a nation take them into captivity again. Unfortunately, that would have happened anyway much later. But at least at this point, we got it right. And we're making sure we keep it right, as Nehemiah was an enforcer of that. You read throughout these chapters of Nehemiah, we won't read all of them, but we see Nehemiah was definitely dedicated, and he even got physical with us, right, as our leader at that time, right, being like a governor, being like a you could say of the king's house, and you had Ezra, who was of the priest's house, right, of that line of Aaron. They were like two main leaders at that time of these exiles going back into Israel. It talks about him actually making threats, saying, "Look, I told you guys not to sell on the Sabbath. If you come back here again with your wares, he said, I'm gonna lay hands on you." And it says, "In that day they didn't come back to sell stuff on the Sabbath." I think that's in chapter 13, but I think it always cracks me up.
Must have made a good impression on him.
Right. And it says that he grabbed some of them. He says he even yoked out some of their hair. So Nehemiah wasn't playing, right? So first he would tell them, nicely, like we read here, and if they decide not to listen, he said, "Oh, okay, all right." He made sure we listened. And it's unfortunate you can't have, men like him that follow his lead afterwards, because usually you have that maybe one or two. And then once the one or two people leave or die or get old, people next in line are just like, they get lax, And you read about Israel falling off again. Like we see that during the time of the judges years before this. Same thing. You get a righteous judge that'll stand up and go, "Look, we got to get these nations off our back and become independent again." And then they do it through righteousness, right? And then throughout their years, Israel does the right things. As long as that judge is judging them righteously, everything's cool. When that judge gets old and dies, Israel looks around, they're like, "Oh, no one around to tell us what to do. To tell us to do the right thing. Time to
Just like kids.
time to start exactly, right? Time to start cutting up again, building idols again, right?" That's like the history of our people, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So all praise to the Most High in Christ by way of the Holy Spirit. This is the last and final captivity. It's like, look, you get it right and get it right now, or don't get it right at all. If you get into the 1/3 of Israel and show and prove in this life, or that's it. But it's all good because whoever's meant to will. Because whoever we are now, that's who we were before then too also. If we're righteous now, who were righteous then when we were here before in our past lives? Because the Most High always left that remnant. The key is just to figure out who the remnant is in these times, right? Go through the wheat as well as the tares. Made reference to Christ's parable, the wheat and the tares, right? How suiting, since we're in the Feast of Firstfruits of the wheat harvest. So I'll read 38. It says, "And the priest, the son of Aaron, shall be with the Levites when the Levites take tithes." Remember, the house of Aaron, they're Levites too. They're just a certain family Levites. "And the Levites shall take up the tithe of the tithes unto the house of our God, to the chambers, into the treasure house. For the children of Israel and the children of Levi shall bring the offering of the corn, of the new wine, and the oil unto the chambers where are the vessels of the sanctuary, and the priests that minister, and the porters and the singers. And we will not forsake the house of our God," right? So everything like they had before, not only just the priests doing their thing, but it says what? The porters and the singers. So he went back to what you had David set up during his time, which was he got certain Levites, had to be appointed singers and performers with instruments to sing praises, right? To where that was just your job as a certain Levi. That was your job to just do praises on the holy days, right? So I'll stop there. That was Nehemiah 10:31. I read down to 39. So these are just different examples of in history when we kept this day. But now let's get a famous one, right? Because I don't want to go super long, but let's get this famous one here too. This is the one that we like to talk about, especially when we go into the milk topic of tongues. We didn't have a time after during the time of Christ and during the time of the apostles where we kept the first fruits or the day of Pentecost because they're the same. Let's go to Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2. And we'll start from verse 1. So Acts chapter 2 in verse 1. It reads, and when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. So day of Pentecost, which we're keeping right now, it says they were all with one accord in one place. Who were the they that were in one accord and they were in one place? We're going to find out. Verse 2, suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the house where they were sitting. So it says a sound came from heaven like uh, a rushing mighty wind, right? So like you hear like a wind on a windy day, how it sounds. That's the sound that they heard. Going into, as we're going to read, the Holy Ghost, Holy Spirit manifesting itself. Because the Holy Spirit can manifest itself in different ways, right? Utilizing the elements. In this case, it's wind. It says, and there appeared unto them cloven tongues, like as of fire, and it set upon each of them. So now we got not only wind, but now fire, the Holy Spirit manifesting as fire. But it says like cloven tongues, right? So this tongue is talking about like something that's shaped like a tongue. When it says like fire, it's like talking about what we would call like a halo. Like, you see the way they depict certain paintings. You see they do it with the icons where they depict it as being people of color the way they're supposed to. But you see when Esau did the Renaissance and whitewashed our paintings and made us look like them, they kept those halos too, where it's like a light, like a halo around the head of Christ or of Mary or of one of the disciples, right? Or other prophets, right? That's what happened. It was like a halo kind of went around our heads that were there. Then it says in verse 4, and they were all filled with the Holy Ghost and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. So the Holy Spirit manifests itself as this wind, then there's this glowing halos, right, like fire. And then it says they spoke with other tongues. So this is where you get the denomination, the Pentecostal church, name themselves after this famous instant here of the day of Pentecost, an actual holy day being kept, which I can't tell you, in my experiences, I've been in the truth. Anytime I've engaged someone, I found out that that's their denomination, I'll ask them, why is it called Pentecostal? Why is your denomination called Pentecostal? And more times than not, I'll usually get the blank look. I don't know. I don't know why we call it Pentecostal. But I do know that we speak in tongues. And they start doing the yeah, yours better than mine.
Get it?
Yeah, I always say the boom shakalaka like they do with the sports games, right? The boom shakalaka stuff, right? Yours is pretty good. That was rather believable. Make sure you leave the old man outside, right, when you come into the church, okay, brother? I'm just messing. I know we all were into weird stuff, right, before we learned the truth.
What was that video that you showed where the dude trying to push the lady down, she wasn't pushing. He said something. He wasn't going to participate, and you shouldn't have got up or something. And she was ball and shit.
Yeah, man, you got to play along, right? So we're going to read right here. It's going to explain to us, in case you have to explain to someone about what the day of Pentecost actually is, as opposed to the Pentecostal denomination of Christianity that claims to speak in tongues, like we're reading here, right? It's going to tell us exactly what these tongues are. It says in verse 5, and they were dwelling at Jerusalem, Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven, right? So this is who was there, right? It wasn't just, anybody that believed. No, the focus was on us, our ancestors, keeping this day of Pentecost, coming to Jerusalem if we were able to keep the feast, right? Those of us that had knowledge. And it tells us, as we're going to read on, so I'm going to all places where we were scattered. Remember Deuteronomy 28 and 64, right? Let me read that real quick before I read on in Acts 2. This is Deuteronomy 28 and 64, which talked about this. If we didn't keep the commandments, one of the most things the Most High said he'd do to us is this. Deuteronomy 28 and verse 64, it reads, and the Lord or Yahweh shall scatter thee among all people, from one end of the earth even unto the other. And there, in the place where we're scattered, thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. See that? Worshipping the creature more than the creator. Wood is a creature. Stone is a creature. The creator created wood and stone. So why are we worshiping the creature more than the creator and making idols out of wood, idols out of stone, right? In today's time, brothers, when they bring this out, they'll use the modern major uh, doctrines that a majority of our people are in, especially here in North America, which is wood, the wooden cross of Christianity, and stone, the Kaaba stone over there in Mecca, right? Since we know Christianity and Islam are one of the two major popular doctrines that you find most of our people into now, right? Mm-hmm. Try to speak a little louder so folks can hear you.
Okay, yeah, I heard regarding cobblestone, someone told me that Abraham gave us
Gave that stone to someone?
gave it to Muslim people.
Mm-hmm. What are our four questions? What are our four questions? What's the first one? To the ignorant, what do we ask them? That's the first one. So they're going to tell you yes, right? Because they're probably in Islam. Then you ask them, do they believe in Christ, right? They're probably going to say, yes, but he was just a prophet, but he wasn't, you know who, right? And you ask them the third question, which is exactly, because many of them will say, yes, we acknowledge the Bible. The Bible speaks on many things. Even the Quran mentions the Bible, right? Which we know it does. And finally, once they claim to have a belief or have a thing, they say, well, Abraham did this. That's where the fourth question comes in, which is, that's the third one. We got, do you believe in God, Christ, the Bible? And what's the fourth one after that? They say yes somewhat to any of those. You're going to have to demand them to do what? There you go. Prove all things, hold fast that which is good, and let them defend their faith. Oh, Abraham told you to bow down to a rock. How do you prove that? Where do you read that? Oh, it's in the Quran. What verse is that? Because I know other verses in the Quran that tell you not to deal with idols, but let me hear where this proof comes from. Maybe it comes from the Bible. Maybe you might know about that. Because the Quran talks about the New Testament, talks about the Old Testament, right? Talks about Isa. That's what they call Yahweh Shai, right? In the Arabic. So you want to have them prove what it is that they're talking about. Find out from them what evidence you use to show that. Because I need to correlate that with the scriptures. Because the Bible talks about Abraham following the laws, statutes, and commandments, right?
Well, Abraham was
Hmm?
who was it?
I guess we know what we're going to be talking about Tuesday. Real quick, not to go off topic, because I know we're talking about the first fruits. Get Genesis 14 and 13, and then we'll pick this up on the Tuesday class. Just so we make sure we're on the same page. Yeah, you want to have them prove this stuff, because we got the records of Abraham right here in the Bible. We got it in the Hebrew also, the ancient Hebrew also. We see exactly what he told Ishmael, right, his elder son, who's the father of the Arabs today. So we're going to need some proof on that. So read that real quick to answer your question, Yakazar. Verse 13. Chapter 14, verse 13.
Genesis chapter 14, verse 13. And there was one that had escaped and told Abram, the Hebrew,
Abram the what?
Abram, the Hebrew,
Abram the Hebrew. Keep going.
what he had dealt in the plan of Marie, an Ammonite, brother of Esau, brother of Amor, and these were his brethren with Abram.
Right. So Abram, according to this, is what?
Hebrew.
Right. And who are the Hebrews?
Hebrews are
So we just talked about this. This was it past Tuesday. So let's get it again. Go to Genesis chapter 10.
this chapter.
Mm-hmm. And then we'll continue on. Yeah, we'll make sure we go through this again and connect all the dots so that we're up to speed. Genesis chapter 10 and verse 21.
Genesis chapter 7 and verse 21. Unto Shem also the father of all the children of Abram.
So it says, unto Shem also, this chapter going into the sons of Noah, right? And the nations that came out of his 3 sons, right? Now we're talking about his son Shem, the father of all the children of Eber. So Eber, who's Eber? Talking to anybody. I guess you first. Who's Eber?
Eber,
Anyone help him?
Hebrew got something to do with Hebrew.
Yeah. What's that something? Dun, 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 dun.
well, he was a father of somebody. He was the
Mm-hmm.
father of father of Eber.
Say we were at camp right now. Oh man. I already know what happened, right? The Gainsayers would be like, see, you guys don't even know what you're dealing with, man. That's why I don't mess with you, Israelites. I'm out of here. You boys don't know what you're doing. I'm saved, brother. I'm saved. Christ loves everybody. I'm out.
That was the father, right? Eber was the father of Abraham.
Yeah, you can say that. Because father also means what? Right. Or ancestor, exactly. Because in the Hebrew, it's not specific. It could be your immediate father. It could also be going back further. Remember what the elder went into Friday night about Jesus Christ, the son of David? He wasn't his immediate son, but he was his what? His successor later on down, right?
He came through that line.
Exactly.
That was the line that he came through Eber. Because Shem had more than one child,
Mm-hmm.
but Eber is the one that the line of Abraham came.
Right. So here's the answer, right? You gotten closest. So everyone that comes out of Eber technically is a Hebrew. The Hebrews, they all come out of Eber. Remember we always say, before the nation was a land, it was a man. Before the nation was a land, it was a man who had sons and daughters, who became a nation, a tribe.
So the Hebrews came out of Eber.
That's how they got their name, from him, their ancestor Eber.
Now, does Eber mean something else in another, mean Hebrew in another language, or how does that go?
Hebrew comes from Eber. They're both are the root word is Ibar, which means of the past or my past. That's what Hebrew literally means when you look it up. So the Hebrews are named after their ancestor Eber, whose name means of the past.
So Eber and Hebrew both mean of the past.
Yes. Jump down to actually keep reading and keep reading until we get to 25, and then we'll get back on the first fruit scriptures. So we're doing in verse 22. I think that was you, Yakaza. Your question, right?
Sorry.
You read 21, right?
Yeah.
So read on.
Verse 22. Children of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Love, and Aram.
Right. So you go on your Tuesday class notes. I know some of you guys watching now we're listening in on Tuesday as well. We went into those different people are, right? But we're focusing on this Arphaxad. But keep reading.
And the children of Aram, Lutz, all gathered and mashed.
Mm-hmm. Read 24.
Arphaxad begot, what was that, Salah?
Mm-hmm.
And Solomon begot Eber.
Right. So now we got Noah to Shem, Shem to Arphaxad, Arphaxad to Salah, Salah to Eber. So we got his great grandson. Read 25.
Verse 25. And unto Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg.
Mm-hmm.
And for in his days was the earth divided. His brother's name was Jotan.
Joke time. So we're going to stop here, but it says, in his son Peleg's days was the earth divided. Genesis 11 goes into that in more detail, but we're not going to that now. But the earth being divided is talking about what? What happened in Genesis 11, the famous event that took place in Genesis 11? Anybody?
Well, that's what divided.
Tower of Babel.
Tower of Babel. And what took place at the Tower of Babel?
The Most High confounded the language.
The Most High, oh, you knew that?
Yeah.
Oh, my bad, because he beat you to it. So the Most High divided them nation-wise and gave them different languages. Because remember, at that point, we all spoke the same thing. So it's significant. Eber's name means of the past because that was a language that everyone spoke at first, which was the Hebrew, right? That's why every nation has a Hebrew name first. Their oldest name is always a Hebrew name, regardless of whether they speak, cuneiform or Sanskrit or Arabic or any languages that we have now, right? From the ancient time up until now. You go back far enough, they had a Hebrew name first. You see? So Genesis 11 goes into more details with that. So that's why Eber, or Hebrew, why that's significant. Okay? So that's who Abraham was. He came out of that lineage, going down through Peleg and then further down.
That's where you get Eber from. That's where you get Eber from.
Mm-hmm. Right. Just like your name, Yakazakala, right? Which is Ezekiel. Your sons and daughters would be the Yakazak Aliyah, or the Ezekielites, right? Because they come out of your loins. So anyone that comes out of your house will be the Ezekielites, or the Yakazak Aliyah. That's your house, you see? That's how nations started back then. Just like you having a family and roots that come out of you, that would be your house. So the Hebrews came out of Eber. That was their forefather. So anyone that came out of them were the Hebrews. The Israelites came later because we came out of Abraham We became Hebrew, but then more specifically, we became Israelites, starting with Jacob, who became Israel, and then he had sons and daughters who had sons and daughters, right? And they became the Israelites because they came out of Israel, their father. Once again, before the nation was a land, it was a man. So only you trace back to that particular ancestor, you can say, okay, I come out of these people. So that answers that.
Yeah.
Okay, and like I said, we'll go with the final tooth comb on Tuesday, most high as well. Anyway, let's go back to Acts chapter 2. So we read Deuteronomy 28 and 64 to show that we will be scattered, right, among the four corners. Then I mentioned the wood and stone. That's how we kind of got on that topic. I mentioned the Kaaba stone and the wooden cross. But now this is why it also says this too. So only link Deuteronomy 28 and 64. You can link Matthew as well. Matthew 28 18 and 19. So Matthew 28 and 18, it reads, is at the end of Matthew, right before Mark. Matthew 28, verse 18. Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Then he says in verse 19, go therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost. So it's a stumbling block for a lot of people. Why? Because what do they see? Go therefore and teach all nations. So they'll use that to say, see, he came for everybody. Yeah. Okay, you might have said he only came for Israel when, I saw what you read in Matthew 15 with the Syrophoenician woman. But after that, he opened the door to everybody. So, yeah, some Christians have this false concept of Acts. Everything changed from what Christ was doing. Now the door is open to everybody. The Gentiles weren't talking about Gentiles, our people in the Gentile from a mind, like the elder was going into today in the service. Let's talk about everybody. But no, he was going out to what? Our people that were scattered amongst all nations. Just like we see in Acts 2 and 5, just like it was already prophesied back in Deuteronomy 28:64. That's what he's talking about here when he says, teach all nations. Yeah, the other nations are going to hear what we're doing. They're going to see it just like they do now. But the focus is our people that are scattered amongst them. That's what we care about. You see? Will the nations hear this and get edified? Sure. They got eyes to see it, ears to hear it, and a heart to understand it. But the focus is on our people. Just like anytime the heathen knew that, they would acknowledge it. Just like the Syrophoenician woman. She knew she was what? Wasn't considered a child, but considered like a dog, like a pet, right? Lower than the children of Israel. And you got heathens in this time where they do the same thing. I know I'm not the chosen, but I know who you guys are. I got all respect for y'all. Can I get a little something? And if they humble themselves, we got to deal like Christ did. Okay, here's a little something. But our focus is on the 12 tribes of Israel, right? To bring our rulership on the scene and do this work. All right. So back to Acts 2 and 5. Acts chapter 2, in verse 5, it says, and there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. See? So that's who the focus is on here. Keeping this day of Pentecost, like we're keeping now. Verse 6, now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because that every man, here it comes, we're about to get the real deal on the tongues. Every man heard them speak in his own language. You hear that? Now, I don't know if you know anybody whose own language sounds like boom shakalaka or bum shada bum she. I don't know anywhere I go on the earth, I don't hear anybody talking like that. Even with those Hamites, in like Central South Africa, certain places, they have that language. They do a lot of clicks. Even they don't sound like that. At least that's somewhat coherent. The way they click their tongue, right? At least that's coherent as opposed to the bum shida da bum shida. And then
Are they talking in tongues when they click their tongue?
yeah, that's an actual language. So I'm gonna give that more credit than what you see them doing in these churches, talking about, oh, I got the tongues. And they got somebody next to them, like Paul said in 1 Corinthians 14, translating for them. And the translation is always, he said, make sure you pay double the pastor fund,
Damn.
pay double the building fund, right? Or some prosperity stuff, right? What he just said, what he or she just said in tongues is, you can get double the blessing as long as you give double the blessing. It's like, oh, so you can interpret what they're saying. Oh wow, and you only, and only you, and clearly, with everything you're saying is saying to what? Give the money, give more money, right? That's always the translation, right? Come on, man. But it says in verse, check it out, 7 and 8 makes it even better. They were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? Right? Meaning those that live in the northern part of Israel. And how hear we every man in our own tongue wherein we were born? Meaning these are languages that they spoke from a young age. They learned from their family, their friends, their immediate environment. Just like children learn the language of those that rear them up. Right? So these are actual spoken languages, not this gibberish that you hear that they do in this Pentecostal church. So when you bring this out to folks, you make it very clear and you say, listen, I know what was happening here in Acts. You break this down clearly. And you use, we could use modern examples. If you speak Chinese, I speak French. And I speak French to you. You understand the same way you understand Chinese as your, first language. Same thing. You speak Chinese back to me. I understand that Chinese the same way I understand the French, as if Chinese was my first language, even though my first language is French. It's like I didn't have to practice at all. I just understand it the same way I understand my primary tongue. That's what happened here in Acts chapter 2. And you can say, what's going on in that Pentecostal church? I don't know what's going on there, but I know it's not what's happening right here. You show them these verses. Then it says in verse 9, Parthians and Medes and Elamites and dwellers in Mesopotamia and in Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, and in parts of Libya about Cyrene, that's going into North Africa, so-called Africa, and the strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes, Cretes and Arabians, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of God. So that's what happened here. These are the tongues of Acts chapter 2 during the Pentecost. Like I said, I can't, emphasize this enough. But like we talked about before, sometimes people will understand what you bring out, but when it comes to this, but it makes it worse when, they go through some kind of affliction like we all do. Say someone's sick, someone's, on their ill on their deathbed maybe, right? Or just ill, right? Could be, not sure how if it's critical or not, or if it's fatal or not. But then folks that are in some denomination, doesn't have to be Pentecostal, just use that as an example, could be anything. And they pray over them according to whatever false understanding they have, thinking they're praying to the God of the Bible. And then the Most High allow that person to be healed, right? Because the devil can heal, right? The Most High can allow an atheist to be healed, right? An atheist can be sick and be like, I believe in myself. I'm going to give myself a placebo and make myself get healed. And then the next day, next week, he or she can be 100%. And they can say, ha, I did this by my own strength, by my own strength of will. The Most High got to allow it to happen. But it sucks for that person because now they're locked in even more into that lie. Because they think the lie that they're into, whether it's atheism, being a Protestant, or, what you call a Pentecostal rather, they think that was the thing that saved them. But it's not. Remember, time and chance happen to all of us. So that's the thing that makes it scary. When they think, oh, okay, you guys teach what you believe, but then I believe what I believe over here in the Pentecostal church, and our prayers are just as good as your prayers. And it's like, just because you get the same results, don't mean they come from the same source, right? That's an illusion. That's a trick. You know, but it's supposed to tell us in Corinthians, and no marvel, for Satan is come as an angel of light. Satan is made into an angel of light. So a lot of folks think they're looking at angels, but they're looking at devils and don't even know the difference. Especially when those devils do miracles and do signs and lying wonders, like the prophecy said, and they get caught up into it. So that's what makes this a little more tricky, right? Yeah, I hear what you're saying, brother. I see the breakdown, but what they're doing over here is working. It worked. They got better. You know, it could be temporarily, right? It could just be, they just got better, but they're still not in the truth, though. So let's make sure we're aware of that, and then just speak to that caveat as well, because we know when it comes to the truth, this deals with the saving of the soul, right? Not just the body altogether. Accept no imitation. Right. So this is the real Pentecost here, and then we have some examples as well, which we'll touch on before we close out, because like I said, I want to go super long, but I want to touch on some examples of us keeping the Pentecost. Let me get another example in the New Testament. And you'll see them being made mention or called the same way by Paul in different letters, where he'll make even references to certain brothers and sisters being considered first fruits, right? As if we were like an offering unto God, right? Referring back to the first fruits, the holy day, but using us metaphorically as first fruits. That's why it says this in Paul's salutation at the end of Romans. This is Romans chapter 16. Romans chapter 16 in verse 5. Romans 16:5, which this chapter is pretty much going into like salutations he put at the end of the letter, where he's like, doing the equivalent, or today we might call shout outs, right? Like, today we might not write a letter. We might do a text message or write an email or be on the radio, right? Or on a phone call. And we say, I want to give a shout out to so-and-so, this person, that person. That's what he's doing here in the letter, right? So Romans 16:5, it says, likewise, greet the church that is in their house. The there, when you read above, is talking about the husband and wife, Aquila and Priscilla, them being the ones that brought Apollos into the fullness of truth. Remember, Apollos, he only knew John the Baptist, but it tells you that they showed him the way of God, showed him the way of God more perfectly, showing him that what? Christ, the one that John the Baptist spoke of, came and died. Salute, well-beloved Epanetus, who was the first fruits of Achaia unto Christ. So referred to as the first fruits of this place, Achaia, this well-beloved Epanetus. So you see his first fruits being used metaphorically here. But it's not just here, right? We can also get this verse as well. 1 Corinthians chapter 16. 1 Corinthians chapter 16. First Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 15. Another reference to these first fruits of Achaia, right? These souls, these righteous souls, right? They were considered first fruits that were taught when they went to that city and taught there, the city Achaia. Or Achaia. It says in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 15, I beseech you, brethren, you know the house of Stephanas, that it is in the first fruits, rather that it is the first fruits of Achaia, just like we read about in Romans, right? And that they have addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints. Check that out. So you got different emotions, right? Quote unquote good, bad emotions, right? But then there's ways that you can take those bad emotions, bad behaviors, and use them towards righteousness. You can be jealous for the Lord of hosts. You can be a proud doer of the law. Addiction, anytime you hear addiction, you think, oh, that's not good. But here's an example of a good addiction. It says, they've addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints. You see that? So this is an addiction that you want to have, right? You want your spirit to always be fiending for these scriptures, for this word, right? You constantly want to re-up. You want to constantly want that dose. And us being in Israel, regardless of your background, you probably got family or friends, at least one family member or friend that's dealt with some kind of addiction of some kind, right? Of some kind of sedative. It's alcohol or drugs, what have you. And whether it's in your immediate family or, friends of family or people in the neighborhood that right? That got, caught up. You see just the motivation, right? That motivation that our people, even the heathen, have when they become addicted to whatever it is, right? They'll have to hoops of fire to get that next dose, right? That next shot, that next line, right? And you say, wow, imagine if they could take that same drive and apply it to something that's actually constructive, right? To have that same drive as someone that has an addiction, right? That are just, feeling to get that next fix, whatever it is, So righteous addiction, 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 15. But the main reason I want to pull this is the whole first fruits reference. And then I'll get one more before we close out, since we're at the 2-hour mark. Let me get this one in Revelations real quick. So we got examples of things that happened in the past, references to first fruits. But now let's get one for the future, and we'll close out on that. So Revelations chapter 14. Revelations chapter 14, we'll start from verse 1. So Revelations 14:1, it reads, so John is having these different visions, right? The disciple of Christ. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written in their foreheads, right? This talking about the chosen men that are going to be the new government, right? 144,000. Revelations chapter 7 goes into this, right? It mentions 12,000 at each of the 12 tribes, right? The Lamb, of course, talking about Christ. The Mount Zion he's standing on, representing our government now being set up. Now, reading on in verse 2, it says, and I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters. Whose voice is like the sound of many waters? It says, and as the voice of great thunder, and I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And it says in verse 3, and they sung as it were a new song before the throne and before the four beasts, right? Like Ezekiel saw and that John saw also. And the elders, 24 elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth, right? So this song is what? A metaphor referring to the truth, right? That's why it says no one could hear or learn this song but the 144, right? But check it out. It says in verse 4, these were they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. Now, this is speaking spiritually, not necessarily physically, as you've had disciples past and present that were married, right? And given in marriage. This is talking about spiritual. We talk about fornication, right? Committing spiritual adulteries means what? Being married to a false god. We're supposed to be married to the Most High as Israel. We're supposed to be married to Christ as the church. That's what it means here when it says not defiled with women and that they're virgins, meaning that we're married to the Most High, married to Christ. But check out what it says next. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth, the Lamb being Christ. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. See that? Being the first fruits unto God. You see that? So here we're being likened unto the first fruits metaphorically also. So we touched on many past examples about what? Being the first fruits themselves as far as the holy day, as well as what? Us keeping the first fruits throughout history. And then we finally have what? A future prophecy where we're being likened unto the first fruits. Once again, the theme here being what? Always want to give your first, your best. Whatever the Most High blessed you with, you make sure Most High gets his cut first and foremost, right? You know, we've had discussions around tithing and things like that. I know your brother Kaham Bakwad, you know, he's a big proponent of that, where he's like, look, you'll notice that change, and you really commit to tithing, right? And making sure no matter what, right off the top, you get that tenth unto the Most High, and you show that consistently, right? And you know, just sit back and behold the way the Most High can just open doors for you, right? When you do that. So the Most High always gets his first and foremost, because why? He's the reason why we have anything to begin with. So why not give him his first and give him the best? Your first and your best. That's why when it comes to offerings, it says it has to be of the first year, as far as, you know, animal offerings, and it can't be lame or it can't be blemished, right? So you got a whole bunch of lamb, right? And it comes time to offer one of these lambs up to the Most High, and you're like, oh, this lamb here, they got the short leg, or they got the lazy eye, you know, they got the mismatch pattern of his of fleece. Let me go ahead and give that to God, right? Because I know I can't get no money from him. Like I care for these other ones. Let me give my little, you know, limp, you know, limp deformed lamb. Let me give that to the Most High. No, don't do that. Don't you dare do that. But see, that's what Israel will do. The Most High to put a law there and go, no, I get your best because I gave you everything that you had. I'm the best. What other God is there like me that can do what I do for you and for everything? So make sure I get the best. That's a fair deal. So we got a law every year to remind us of that. First fruits. Because think about it, you know, if your main profession is working in agriculture, right? Whether you're a farmer or a husbandman, right? You grow trees. This is a time when what? The summertime is like, you know, a time where you're like, oh man, everything's coming in, you know, I'm cutting everything, I'm selling everything, you know. And it's so easy to get caught up, right? As money's coming in, right? You're like, oh man, go, oh, all these crops, oh, summertime, I love it. It's so easy to get caught up in the flesh and you forget, oh, before I go and try to spend this on myself or my family or whatever I want to do, let me make sure I give the Most High his due. The Most High is the only reason why I've had this increase right now to begin with. Let me make sure I give him his due first. And I said that's the last verse, but let me just read this as well. I like this because this is kind of like the Lord's Prayer. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Spirit of Christ wasn't on David when he said these words. But you'll see a similar parallel to what David's about to say as it parallels to Christ's Lord's Prayer. We're going to see this whole concept of first fruits, that which is most important, going to the Most High. But this is First Chronicles. First Chronicles. First Chronicles chapter 29. I'm going to start from verse 10. So as we read it, you're going to see similarities between what David says here and what Christ gives us as far as what we now know as the Lord's Prayer. Check out what David says during this prayer and also what he says towards the end. First Chronicles 29 and verse 10. This is going to be our last verse unless someone has something they want to bring out. So First Chronicles chapter 29 and verse 10, it says, wherefore David blessed Yahweh before all the congregation, and David said, blessed be thou, Yahweh power of Israel, our Father, forever and ever. Verse 11, thine, O Yahweh, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty. Right? Sounds very much like Kanya Kanan, would you call it? The doxology?
Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
That's what they call it, right? The thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever.
It's not in the original text.
Right, because I know in Luke chapter 11, first couple of verses, it's there too, right? But then it just says, deliver us from evil, and it just moves on. Because the Lord's Prayer is in two Gospels. But it says, for all that is in the heaven and the earth is thine. Thine is the kingdom, O Yahweh, and thou art exalted as head above all. Both riches and honor come of thee, and thou reignest over all. And in thine hand is power and might. And in thine hand it is to make great and to give strength unto all. Now therefore, our God, we thank thee and praise thy glorious name. But who am I, and what is my people, that we should be able to offer so willingly after this sort? For all things come of thee, and of thine own have we given thee. For we are strangers before thee and sojourners, as were all our fathers. Our days on the earth are as a shadow, and there is none abiding. O Lord our God, all this store that we have prepared to build thee an house for thine holy name cometh of thine hand, and is all thine own. See that? So, even though they're building a house unto his name to dedicate unto him, just like we're talking about dedicating our first fruits or our tenths, our tithes, right? David here is acknowledging, look, we're building this for you, but in the end, it's all yours anyway, right? So there's nothing we can really give to you, like as if you would be lacking. No, it's all yours anyway, right? So that's just something we always would be reminded of when it comes to the first fruits, and just what the theme behind the first fruits is. Even if we're a farmer living on a farm, growing things, and literally giving our first fruits, or we're thinking on a spiritual wise as far as giving up our first fruits unto the Most High when it comes to whatever He's blessed us with, be it carnal or spiritual or both, right? Giving up our best and brightest, our strongest, our increase, however the Most High may have blessed us, giving Him His due first and foremost. Hence the first fruits, Baka Warrior. Okay, so that was it. So that last verse, we read Revelations 14, 1 through 4. And then we tacked on 1 Chronicles 29, 10, and I stopped in 16. Okay. So no one else has any other questions or comments. Here we'll make an end. Hopefully everybody was edified with the scriptures we went over, as well as the history we covered concerning the first fruits, and when and how we kept the first fruits, and the most important thing being why we keep the first fruits and why it's important. And definitely enjoy the day. Try to enjoy as much as possible, right? Hopefully you keep it as a Sabbath where you can cook as well. And we'll be talking to one another in the classes as they come up, the Tuesday and the Friday class, as well as the Sabbath services as they come that are following. So we'll just say Ashar Chag Bakawarium, which just means Happy Feast of First Fruits once again, as we said in the beginning, as we see here in the Hebrew, Ashar, and Chag Nagag Chag Ha Bakawarium, the first fruits. All right, so that will do the closing prayers, and we'll say Sharkog Ha Pawarium, Sharkog Ha Bakawarium again. Wa Laila Tawa. So enjoy the day, Israel. Continue to watch and pray. enjoy the day. Continue to watch and pray. Someone close that biblical show. Switch Micah Allah with Rapa Allah real quick for the ending prayer. You know what I mean? For that healing. Barakateh Hawa by Shimi Hawa Shai, Asharath and now Pari Agapin Thwada Aman. La Yahwa by Shimi Hawa Shai, Af Yasha Allah. English translation: Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. Ahmadwa, Panua Yerushalayim, stand and face Jerusalem. Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Babakushai, Shemad, Lanawa, Aitha, Yamyan, Aitha, Shalak, Mike Allah, Walla Allahayan, Tazwadakim, La, Shamar Ayel, Barak, Rapah, Magun, Wad Chazayak, Banya, Yasha Allah, Washalak, Lanawa, Rabian, Kakama, Rabian, Da'aith, Rabian, Bayanah, Rabian, Sabalanwa, Rabian, Amawan, Rabian, Aqua, Rabian, Ahabian, Rabian, Haganah, Rochanaya, Wasalak, Kau, Katayanawa, La Akim, Wa Akiwa, Wayash Allah, Tamyad, Waiwalam, Ba'ashem, Yahawashai, Tawada, Aman. English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, please listen to us now, right now. Send Michael and the righteous powers to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. And send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins. For the brothers, sisters in Israel, always and forever, in the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, so be it. Four corners prayer. Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Barak Nawa, Wayasha Allah, Wabathya Saparim, Shema, Yasharallah, Yahweh, Allah, Yahweh, Echad. Translation: Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, bless us in Israel in the house of books. And then we said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Now we're going to do the prayer for the food and then close out. Yahweh, Gadawo, Basham, Anawanya, Yahweh Shai, Babagosha, Barak, Mako, Yanawa, Shatayawath, Yanawa, Yayan, Yanawa, Lacham, Yanawa, Shakarat, Yanawa, Zachar, Bakawarium, Basham, Yahweh the weather Amen. All right, so Sharkak Bakawarian once again. Continue to watch and pray, Israel, as we get closer and closer to that day of Christ making his second coming. Happy Feast of First Fruits. We'll talk to you guys this upcoming week. Enjoy the feast day.
Shalom.
Shalom.